Welcome to the second season of the Make the Future podcast. I'm your host, Jacques Beauvais, Dean of the Faculty of Engineering at the University of Ottawa. Join us as we have conversations with different thought leaders about current issues facing the engineering industry. Let's explore the future of technology and innovation and how, through creativity and collaboration, we can make the future.
They say the future is coming, but that's not true. The future is already here. And it's relentless. It's not going to wait for you to catch up. How will we live in this future? How will we make sense of it? To define our course, we need a new perspective. One that engages our curiosity, that activates our imagination, one that defies the conventional. To own the future, we need to do more than just see it. We need to make it.
So welcome to today's podcast, where we're going to look again at the question of equity, diversity, inclusivity. And I'm joined again by Thusha Agampodi, who's engineering manager at Magnet Forensics. Welcome, Thusha.
Thank you.
So we still have a lot of questions about where does the lack of diversity come from, and what have we done in terms of progress, and to see, how does it happen when we're doing the recruitment, and how does it start? And we've got some really interesting guests today to talk about this. So we have Erin Blaskie, who's the director of marketing at Spark, and she's been a regular columnist for the Huffington Post. She's worked with Forbes, Entrepreneur, and the Wall Street Journal. And we're also going to be joined by Karolina Kural, who's an alumni of the University of Ottawa in communications in 2014, and she's a recruitment program specialist at Kinaxis. And she's also part of the uOttawa Canada North Regional Alumni Council and on the program committee for the uOttawa Canada North Initiative. So she knows about how we're trying to reach out and connect with the industry. And I think it's interesting. You, in the very first episode, Thusha, you talked about the importance in going to high school and meet some people, and you've written about this on LinkedIn.
It's really important. I think, while we work hard to create inclusive environments, the fact still exists that we're not getting enough women coming into these STEM fields.
Right.
So I think we have to start as early as we can. If I have small kids now, so I can see the effect that starts really early. So I'm really looking forward to talking to Erin and Karolina.
So let's jump into our conversation then. So welcome to today's podcast. We're going to discuss inclusion and diversity and the importance of allies in the work environment. Please talk a little about the experience of being a startup founder. How was your experience, as a woman in the tech sector and all that? Or did you have allies? Did you have mentors? We've talked a little bit about over the last episodes about mentors and coaches.
Yeah, so I started my company really young. I was 21, and I was from a very small town. A lot of blue-collar workers. I didn't have a lot of examples of what it meant to be a CEO or to run a company, but I just had this vision from the age of 6, which I know sounds really funny, but my dad had given me a Commodore 64, and I remember playing with it and thinking, this is the coolest.
64?
Yeah, Commodore
Holy
64.
Cow.
And so I remember thinking, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And from there, I remember setting it all up, and I'd play Office with my sister, and she was always my secretary because she's my younger sister. That's just what you do with younger siblings. But I played with this computer, and I would play Office, and I was the CEO, and I'd fill a briefcase filled with papers and walk around the house. And this was sort of something that stuck with me for a really long time. But not having a lot of examples, I didn't really know how to go about it or how to start a company until I started working down here in Ottawa, and I had a female CEO in our company. And she really was, I would say, was the first time when I looked at someone and thought, I want to be her. This is really cool. She's running a company. She's got the world's her oyster. there's unlimited potential here. And so I think probably 6 months into that role, I started my own company. I started a virtual assistance business, which means something very different in 2004 than it does today. It literally has nothing to do with like virtual, like that we would think about today, except that I was just providing services to companies from around the world from here, right in the Ottawa Valley. And this was really eye-opening for me because it opened sort of this entire world of possibility that I didn't know. I mean, I guess I kind of knew it existed. I had glimpses of it, but I really got thrown into it. And what was interesting, though, is a lot of my early clients weren't from here. So they were in the Silicon Valley in the States. And so working with them, I actually initially didn't find there was any sort of barrier to entry or inability to kind of take hold of some of these opportunities. For me, it was sort of just like, they need the work and then I have the service, so let's pair together, and it worked really, really well. Once I got into the working world, so I actually did the reverse of what a lot of people do. A lot of people start employed and move self-employed. I did the opposite. Moving in that direction, coming back into the work world and working in tech, where I was face-to-face now with men and women, I realized there are a lot of problems. It's not an easy, road to walk as a woman in tech, especially. And since then, I've really had to find, communities of women that I can rely on, that I can be an ally for, and really look for that. But early days for me as a startup founder, I would have told you that I had zero problems.
So my experience, I would say, was slightly different. I'm from Poland, and I studied law in Poland, which was very male-dominated, and it was clear. And when I moved to Canada, I went back to school to University of Ottawa. I studied management there, and my new environment was very diverse. And to be honest, I didn't see any problems then. But then when I started working, I started realizing how much more difficult it is for women in many different ways. Finding a potential mentor can be really difficult if you work with mostly men and you're a young female, because all of a sudden this man may want to take you for lunch or for coffee, and people start talking, right? So it's really, really difficult if you end up in an environment where you work with mostly men and you're looking for a mentor. You don't really have many options. And then there are other things like going golfing. This is something I've never done and didn't really have interest in doing. And I realized that all of my male coworkers would get together and go golfing, or get together, go for beer, or get together and do something together and bond and develop relationships, find mentors kind of in a natural way. And I couldn't do it because I was not a part of it. And maybe also I didn't want to go for beer after work every day, right? I do have a mentor, and he's a male, and we have a program, mentorship program. So I was able to be matched with someone based on our skills and what we have to offer to each other. So it's official and it's organized, and I don't think I could benefit from something like that in an environment when it's not supported.
So the way that's done, you feel comfortable? You feel the trust in that mentor?
Yes, exactly. And you sign up for the program. Okay. You fill in a profile. It's kind of like dating. So you say what you're
not in my
for.
days. We didn't fill out forms to date.
That's how people date now.
Okay.
You have an online profile. You say what you're interested in, and then other people have an online profile, and they say what they have to offer, and you get matched by someone who's administering this program. And this is how you find your mentor.
I've heard this.
It's amazing.
This existed at BlackBerry as well, the mentorship program. But definitely, I agree with you. They say the relationships you build outside of work are so important to strengthening how you work together. So definitely, if you're going golfing with your buddies and if you're going for beer, like when I first got out of engineering, I didn't really like beer. I do now, but partly because I had to.
And wine.
Yeah, I like wine. I've always liked wine. but I had to like beer, and because that was my option. I worked in a team of all guys, and they would go out for beer, and I was missing out if I didn't go, because of course your work conversation continues outside, and they would have discussions and come to agreements, and then they'd get to work and they'd be like, oh, we made this decision at the pub, and that wouldn't be okay. So what I encourage young women at my company now, and I ask the male leaders too, if you're going out for coffee or if you're going out for lunch, what's your natural instinct? Like, you might go grab someone from the team, but you gravitate more towards another guy to say, hey, I'm going to grab a coffee, do you want to come with? And I tell them, what stops you from going to ask one of the women? And they're like, well, it's kind of weird. People might talk, there's the whole the view
stigma.
From society, the stigma as well. So I remind them, I'm like, you have to get over that, because the women are not getting the same time with you that the men are getting them, so men and women have to be aware of it, and just
and going back to the networking events that you were talking about, one of the things that I recognized in my position at Allspark, we do a lot of events throughout the year for founders, and they were always sort of the same events, this typical networking event with beer and wine and whatever. And so I looked at that, and there's sort of twofold. For me, it was also a mental health aspect to it too. Like, I wanted to look at how could we encourage entrepreneurs to get out from behind their computer, not get so burnt out, talk to other founders and that kind of thing. But knowing that there's a place for events that are a little bit more inclusive and a little bit more encouraging for, especially women to come out to, we started a new series called Unplugged. Yeah, and it's been amazing. It's we've done yoga, we've done rock climbing, which is a very unisex sport, even though it's more still male dominated.
No golf.
No golf, no. And now we're doing hiking in September, where we're actually going to have some speakers, and they're going to talk about founder failures, and the feedback we've had is not just on the diversity side from these events, but also that not everyone wants to go out and drink. And some people don't even want to attend events where there's alcohol for their own personal reasons.
For cultural reasons.
Yeah.
Many.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's been fantastic. It's actually got a lot of female founders out, which has been amazing. A lot of women in tech out, and I just think it's a side effect to, like, it's sort of one of these side benefits that we went in on more on the mental health aspect. Being someone who's suffered from burnout and depression in my past as a founder, but now we have this other feedback coming out too of that they're more inclusive. Who's missing from the table, and that table could be anything. It could be the stage, it could be a panel, it could be whatever it is that we're working on. And I think it's nice to see that question being asked more, whereas even a year ago that was not a question that I saw people asking a whole lot. And I do find even my own mindset, again, I can only speak to my own experiences, but even my own mindset has changed, and now I won't actually say yes to anything if I can't answer the question, is this an inclusive initiative? Is this accessible for everyone? And if it's not accessible for everyone, I'm actually saying no now. So I find that even for myself, from my own personal experience, I feel like my mind has been shifted a lot. And if I'm just one mind, and I know I'm not alone, I'm sure a lot of other people's mindset's been changing.
I think definitely I've heard that initiative for men and women to be aware of. If you're being asked to speak on a panel, if there are no women on the panel, you should consider declining.
Yes.
You join the panels that are more inclusive. So I think if more of us were aware of that, we could progress much faster. Because you're working on the recruiting side, I'm curious to hear about what types of steps you take to be aware of the unconscious biases that exist and how you get a diverse mix of candidates in.
So first of all, where do you think the recruiting process starts? Candidate applies and you start interviewing. But I would say it starts much earlier with your employer branding activities. So we cannot hope anymore that candidates that we want will somehow come across our job description somewhere posted on internet. And I think we actually have to take steps, and very intentional steps, to make people aware of our organization and why it would be a good fit for them. So this is employer branding, and what we do and how we do it and stories that we tell will attract different types of candidates. So even simple things like pictures of employees working together. Who are they? Are they three white males, or are they a more diverse group, right? Or do you highlight your female employees and their accomplishments? And this is, first of all, how you get different types of people interested in your organization, because unfortunately, if 90% of your candidates are male, you will end up hiring more male. It's just simple math. So you have to do something to attract different groups. So I would say this is where it starts. It's important to go to different events, really make sure that you target different groups, and really expand your candidate pool, and maybe think a little bit outside of the box. So I would say this is step one. And then your job descriptions. You want to make sure that you are attracting all kinds of candidates. So for example, you don't want your vocabulary to be very masculine. So words like dominate or competitive will attract more males than females. And there are many online tools where you can just copy your job description, paste it, and it will analyze it for you, tell you if it's more masculine or feminine, and suggest what words you could replace with more neutral words.
That's really cool.
Those at Magnet, so
Really?
That's amazing.
Wow. Yeah.
That's great that you do that. Also your requirements. So research has shown that women are less likely to apply for jobs that they are underqualified for. So if you have a very long list of requirements, you may end up getting more male candidates who are underqualified as well, but more likely to apply anyway than female candidates. And you are missing on many really strong candidates, right? What else? During your interview process, first of all, you want to make sure it's standardized. So you follow the same steps with all of your candidates. I think that a lot of companies still rely a lot on referrals, which is great, because when you get referrals, you get people who hopefully will fit your culture and help you strengthen it. But also you are at risk of hiring more of the same people.
The same type of people, definitely.
Yeah. So then it's especially important to go through the same process even with your referrals.
For the interview process, I wanted to say and ask what you think about this. We've done this too. We put like diverse mix of interviewers.
Yes.
You know, so that because we all have our biases, as long as they pass the technical interview, I figured, let their diversity, have your biases so that because I have diverse mix of interviewers, they can hire diversity,
Exactly. And it's normal. We all tend to like people who are similar to us more than people who aren't. So having a diverse group of interviewers is very important. And also, it's for the candidate's benefit as well, because if let's say I go to an interview and I'm being interviewed by 6 men, maybe I'm not as comfortable as I could have been if it was a more diverse group, right? So it's definitely very important. And also there are many ways to really focus on skills rather than the profile of the candidate and their background or gender or age or anything else. Or even educational diversity, that's important too. Not everyone can afford to go to the best school, but they may still be very smart and valuable and really add a lot of value to your organization. So there are many ways you can really focus on skills. So for example, what we do at Kinaxis, for certain jobs, we have an online test, and anyone can take it without even submitting a resume. As long as their score is good, we will invite this person for an interview. And at this point, we know nothing about them. All we know is the email address that they used to complete the test. We don't know how old they are, where they went to school, what their background is, nothing. So that's another way you can really focus on skills and not everything else that may bias you a bit, in your process.
Did you find that, after you put that in place, did you find your pool got more diverse?
And actually, we ended up hiring few people that we would never hire otherwise, because
You
first
like
of
old
all,
guys like me?
Quite possibly, yeah.
Yeah. No, but seriously, I would never screen their resume in. I would just think this candidate is not qualified. And I'm sure that our managers would never want to talk to them. But because they started with the test, we reached out, and then we realized, oh wow, this is actually really great that we are doing this, because otherwise we would never talk to this person.
And these people that have surprised you, they've become great employees?
Yes, amazing employees.
Yeah.
And so, what do you think it was? Was it like, in terms of why they weren't screened in before? Was it usually like their resume wasn't so great, or?
So it could be lack of experience, or maybe a degree that is not relevant.
Or lack of Canadian experience. I know there's a bias against that.
Right.
You know, so
I went shopping some time ago for a gift for a friend who just had a baby, and I could not believe what I saw. There were clothes for baby girls, and they were pink, and they had pretty fabulous signs on it. And then there were clothes for baby boys, and they had signs like adventurous and go
Space
far.
traveler.
Yeah. And I just couldn't
or
believe
like
that.
MVP.
Yes.
That's what they have on the boys' shirts and
Yes.
They all have
And
their
girls,
challenges.
princess.
Yeah, I have a boy and a girl, and I've noticed
Yes.
how it's given me an interesting perspective about how they're treated differently by society so early on, because all of us often come into my daughter about what she's wearing and how she looks, and then people come into my son about what he does and what he accomplishes, and then the shirts don't help. All of the ones for guys, like it says, there's shirts that say just go for it. I wish I had a shirt growing up as a girl that said just go for it, you know. So, and my daughter's ones are all like unicorns and rainbows, and there's ones that say no drama, oh, your smile can change the world.
What do you see around you, not necessarily in your company, but around the industry right now?
So we've been trying to make some progress. For example, we actually partnered with University of Ottawa. I'm not sure if you know, with the Faculty of Education. And for 2 years now, we've been organizing high school hackathons. So we partner through University of Ottawa with certain high schools, and we send our employees to work with students as mentors. And students get a month to develop a game, actually, some sort of game. And then at the end of the month, we all get together and they present their projects and we choose winners. And the reason we do it is because we want to encourage more people to consider computer science and related programs when they go to university, but also maybe encourage more girls as well.
Do you send female mentors do you carefully pick who you
Yes,
send?
we do try, but unfortunately we have more male developers, so we end up with more male mentors.
I'm thinking, like, I've done high school visits to talk about why I went through engineering, and something you just said struck with me, because we've had these conversations with a few other folks now. I would love for us, at least in Canada, in Ottawa, to all come together, because I know a lot of companies have these initiatives that they're working on to increase the pipeline, and it has to start at high school level, you know, or earlier.
Yeah.
So given that, like, my company is doing this and your company is doing this, we're all doing this, I would love for us to start a program where we all get in it together to put more examples out there in front of these young women in high school or earlier. I don't know what that is, but
Well, a good model too, is Technovation.
Yeah.
Technovation's a fantastic model. They've been able to take that globally. And I know they're more focused on sort of the building of a startup, but it's still very tech focused because they're programming the product that they're building, they're putting it all together, and then they present it. Sounds very similar to the hackathon. And that's been an incredible program.
I've been looking at some research recently about someone analyzed lines in movies and compared how many lines male character have versus female characters. And it looks like in most of movies, men just
Yes.
talk, and women are there.
Just there.
Pretty.
Look pretty.
They're just there to be. Yes, I saw the same research and I was astounded. It's on. I wouldn't have even noticed it, but I would not be surprised at the impact that it's had on me subconsciously.
But we've
you
also
know?
been subconsciously programmed not to notice it, right?
Right.
Yes,
Yeah. I think we grow up thinking that how we look is more important than
Yes.
what we say. It takes a long time to get out of that, you know, and there's not enough role models of strong female leaders out there, and
Yes.
we don't see it in movies. We don't even in the ads you see on TV. You know, the ads for men versus women's products. It's all about looks and not about.
We're in the age of the Instagram influencer as well,
Oh,
you know.
it's
Like,
terrible.
I can be famous for looking really cute on my Instagram. And that is what people see, and that looks like something to aspire to. And
Yeah.
it would be so fantastic if instead, you know, there was Instagram accounts of incredible women that were doing amazing things in STEM that, you know, then I could say to my daughter, you know, follow these accounts. Because as soon as she sees that it's a possibility, then she starts to think, oh, I can do that too. But until that moment, it's not even on her radar.
And teachers, I read a study that talked about how teachers early on, like grade 3, 4, and this continues on to your career, give feedback differently to men versus women. So young boys, it's like the difference between effort-based feedback and ability-based feedback. So if you tell someone, like, if they do something, you know, really well, you say, wow, you tried really hard, you know, great job. They're more likely to do it again, as opposed to if you just say, like, good job, you know, you're so good at that. Then next time you give them something harder to do, they might not try because they might think, oh, I only want to hear you say, like, I'm good at it. So you always want to praise them about trying. And apparently boys are given that effort-based feedback a lot more. And even in performance reviews in companies, I've read that women are given feedback that's more personal.
Right.
Where it might be like, you talk too much, you know, whereas if you give the same feedback to a man, apparently it's more constructive. Like, you might say, you should slow down and listen more.
Right.
So there's just, it's the same feedback, but worded differently, and one is constructive and one is personal. So this was a study I read somewhere about.
Or you're too direct.
Yes.
Versus
Women get that all the time.
you're driven, right?
Yes. Yeah. I think it actually would be really interesting to assess that and sort of just see, you know, what is the impact if you started to change that dialogue in workplaces. Because I know, and even if you start to think about and listen to how your colleagues are talking about each other. You hope they're not talking about each other, you know, negatively, but I'm sure that they do. And if you just start to think about how are they talking about that person, are they saying, oh, you know, Erin she's so hyper, or she's so, I mean, because I'm sure people say that about me, I'm very hyper, but, you know, that could be a very personal characteristic of me, rather than she gets things done, or she's dedicated or hardworking, because I think it's right. It's very personal.
I ask, when people sometimes say that comment about a woman, I usually ask, would you say the same if that was a guy? Just imagine that was a guy.
Right.
Would you apply that same term? And if you wouldn't, then maybe don't use it. Like, would you call a guy bossy? If you wouldn't, then don't use that term with the woman. I'm coming back to the topic we started with, which was networking. And I wanted to talk to Erin. You know, you've talked about finding your tribe and finding a group of women. And Erin and I are part of this group of women. We lunch together every once in a while. I get a lot out of it, but I was curious to ask her, like, what you get out of it, you know, finding this group of women, because I think you were asking about you were saying how hard it is to network. So I think certainly for the younger generation, it's good to hear.
Yeah, I get a lot out of it. And I would say, you know, the lunch that I do with you and the other, you know, relationships that I've built with other mentors or other groups, I get a lot out of it because I think the first thing that it does is it lets me know that the things I'm experiencing are not unique to me. And that's both comforting but also a little sad, especially depending on what we're talking about. Because if I'm talking about having a terrible experience with, you know, some male in tech, then someone else is like, well, me too. Then it's sort of like, okay, you don't want that to be the case. But it's reassuring that at least what I'm going through isn't in a silo. I also really love how empowered it makes me feel. So we have a lot of conversations around how to ask for what you're worth, or about, just negotiating salaries, like different things that are hard conversations often for women. And those things I do carry back into my job, and I carry them into the rest of my, working life. So for me, it's really valuable. And I try to always as well give back into the group when I can, as anytime I can. So I actually was just having a call this morning with one of the ladies in the group, and we were chatting about career progressions and just like general career stuff, and the ability for me to kind of have both the group but then take those one-on-ones when they're more intentional has been really, it's just been really great for me. And and I feel very fortunate. I've had an interesting career with a lot of winding paths, and because of that I feel like I've got a lot of different experiences I could share, again through my own lens, and to be able to pass that on to someone else feels really great. So I get a lot, and I try to give a lot whenever I can, and for me it's just been great to feel like part of a community.
But imagine being a part of a group that doesn't have that at all. So for example, at Kinaxis, we hire people on the autism spectrum. And I went to a conference some time ago about autism at work, and I was listening to a speaker who told this amazing story. He was on the autism spectrum, and he grew up in 50s in south of United States, and he didn't know back then that he was on the spectrum. He grew up with a bit of a racist community, and one of his good friends was a female who was African American, and her father was very encouraging, and he would always point out those successful women who maybe were also African American and encourage her to be like them and don't be discouraged. And he told us there were no people like him that someone would point out to him and tell him, look, this person is also on the spectrum and look how successful they are. So I think that just talking about all those issues, regardless of what group we are talking about, just talking about those issues and being transparent and sharing with others our own experiences is so important for other people to not feel alone.
It's a pleasure to interview both of you
it's
a little
mutual.
bit more and have this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Thusha, that's been 4 conversations that we've been having with some leaders in Ottawa on the topic of equity, diversity, and inclusivity. I feel like I've learned quite a bit about where this lack of diversity starts, where the ideas are even being embedded in the thinking of our children and our young people. There's still a lot to do on our part. I mean, we talk about this, but we're very far away from solving the issue, haven't we?
I know we are. It's been great. I have also learned quite a bit. I think we have a lot of work left to do. I'm really glad to have all of these leaders who joined us to continue to have the conversation. And I'm hoping that, in Ottawa, we continue to talk about these topics until we get to a point where we can improve our numbers.
And it's really vital because as much as we like to say that the Ottawa Tech Hub has expanded, it's the number 1 tech hub in Canada. It not only its growth, but even its survival depends on our ability to really progress on these issues. So thank you so much, Thusha, and I hope that for our listeners that those conversations were as inspiring to you as they were to us, and that we were able to contribute to push those conversations just a little further. I want to thank you all for tuning in on this episode of the Make the Future podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation and that you learned as much as I did. Don't forget to follow or subscribe to the podcast to make sure you don't miss the next episode. I would also like to really thank our guests and the podcast production team. Carl Borns, Valérie Sanson, Karen Massé, and Francis Bertrand Lafrenière. And I really hope you can join us next time.